My name is Ben Kessler, and for 7 years, I drove the same delivery route through southern Wisconsin. 5 nights a week, I carried restaurant supplies from a distribution warehouse outside Janesville to diners, taverns, gas stations, and small grocery stores scattered between Elkhorn and the Illinois line. It was steady work. Quiet work. The kind of job where most nights blurred together until you could drive the entire route without thinking. I knew every pothole, every blind corner, every mailbox leaning toward the road. I knew which farms kept their porch lights on until midnight and which stretches went completely black after sunset. Bray Road was one of those stretches. It ran through open farmland, patches of woods, and low marshy ground where fog settled close to the pavement. There were houses along it, but they were spaced far apart, and most sat well back from the road. During the day, it looked harmless. At 2 in the morning, it felt different. Not haunted. Not exactly. Just empty in a way that made you aware of how far you were from anyone who could help you. The first carcass appeared in early October. A deer lay in the ditch on the east side of the road, about half a mile past an old red barn. I noticed it because the body was still steaming. The night was cold enough that my breath showed inside the cab whenever I spoke, and the deer's open abdomen sent a pale mist curling into the headlights. I slowed down as I passed. Its hind legs were twisted toward the road. The front half had been pulled down into the weeds. Roadkill was common along my route. Deer were everywhere, and I had seen enough of them struck by cars to recognize the damage. This one had not been hit. There was no blood on the pavement. No broken glass. No skid marks. Something had opened the animal from beneath the ribs and eaten through the stomach. I remember thinking coyotes. Maybe several of them. I kept driving. 3 nights later, another deer appeared less than 2 miles north of the first. This one had been dragged beneath a wire fence. Tufts of brown fur clung to the barbs, and the body lay on its side with the ribcage exposed. I saw the tracks this time. They crossed the muddy shoulder in front of my truck. At first glance, they looked canine. A large dog, maybe. But the prints were too big. Each was nearly as long as my hand, with deep impressions at the front where the claws had sunk into the mud. I stopped the truck and leaned toward the windshield. The tracks came out of the ditch, crossed the road, and disappeared into a cornfield. There was something else strange about them. The distance between each print was inconsistent. For several yards, they formed the pattern of an animal moving on 4 legs. Then, near the center of the road, there were only 2 lines of impressions. Left, right, left, right. Like whatever made them had stood up. I sat there staring until another vehicle appeared behind me. Its headlights filled my mirrors, and the driver tapped the horn. I moved on. The next night, I asked one of the cooks at a tavern in Elkhorn if there were wolves in the area. He laughed. Not down here. I told him about the tracks. His expression changed slightly, though he tried to hide it. He asked where I had seen them. When I said Bray Road, he turned back toward the grill. Probably a big dog. That was all he said. At the time, I accepted it. A mastiff. A shepherd mix. Something that had escaped from a nearby farm and learned to hunt. That explanation worked until the 3rd carcass. It was not a deer. It was a calf. I found it near a drainage culvert just after 1 in the morning. The animal had been pulled through a section of damaged fencing. Its neck was bent at an angle that made my stomach turn, and the ground around it had been flattened by something heavy. The calf had not been eaten cleanly. Its hide was peeled back from the shoulder, and several ribs had been snapped outward. I could see deep punctures along the throat. Not one bite. Several. I stopped 50 feet away and kept the doors locked. The delivery truck idled beneath me. The cab vibrated gently, and the refrigerator unit hummed behind my seat. I watched the ditch. The grass moved in the wind. Then, something shifted beneath the culvert. It happened so quickly that I convinced myself it was water. A dark shape withdrew beneath the concrete pipe. I switched on the high beams. The culvert was large enough for a person to crawl through, though no person would have wanted to. Rainwater and field runoff trickled through the opening. Weeds hung over both sides. Something was breathing inside it. I could hear it even through the closed windows. Slow. Wet. Heavy. My hand moved toward the gear shift. A pair of eyes appeared in the darkness. They reflected a dull yellow in the headlights. At first, they were low to the ground. Then they rose. Not by much. Only a foot or two. But they rose smoothly, as if the animal had straightened its back. The eyes remained fixed on me. I drove away before I saw anything else. For the rest of that night, I checked my mirrors every few seconds. I never saw it behind me. By the time I reached home, I had already started rewriting what happened. A large dog had been sheltering in the culvert. Maybe a wolf. The headlights made the eyes seem higher than they were. Fear had filled in the rest. That was the version I repeated to myself. Then the carcasses started following my route. The first 3 had all been along Bray Road. The 4th appeared outside Delavan, nearly 11 miles away. A raccoon torn in half beside a gas station dumpster. 2 nights later, I found a dead fox near one of my restaurant stops. Its body had been placed in the center of the gravel loading area. Not dropped. Placed. The legs were tucked beneath it, and its head faced the building. There were no visible wounds except for the throat. I parked several spaces away and called the manager. He came outside carrying a broom. When he saw the fox, he stopped. That wasn't here an hour ago. I asked if the security cameras covered the loading area. He checked from inside while I unloaded the truck. The camera had lost signal shortly before midnight. It returned 9 minutes later. The fox was already there. Over the next week, I began seeing tracks at every stop. Sometimes they appeared in mud behind restaurants. Sometimes in patches of frost beside the road. Once, I found them outside the warehouse where I loaded the truck. Large canine prints. Then 2-legged impressions. Always moving in the direction I traveled. I told my supervisor someone might be following the delivery vehicles. He asked whether I had seen a person. I said no. He asked whether anything had been stolen. I said no. He told me to document it if it happened again. I started taking photographs. Most came out badly. The flash flattened the tracks into pale shapes without depth. The prints looked smaller in pictures than they did in person. Still, I kept them. I had 12 photographs by the end of October. Each showed the same thing. 4-legged tracks approaching. 2-legged tracks leaving. I stopped asking people about wolves. Instead, I searched online. That was when I first read about the Beast of Bray Road. The stories went back decades. People described seeing a wolf-like creature along rural roads outside Elkhorn. Some said it ran on 4 legs. Others said it stood upright. They described broad shoulders, long arms, pointed ears, and a face like a German shepherd or a wolf. Several witnesses said it had been eating roadkill. One woman claimed she saw it mealing over an animal near the road. Another said it chased her car. The reports came from different years. Different people. Different stretches of road. But the descriptions rarely changed. That bothered me more than anything. Animals varied. Their size changed. Their coloring changed. They aged. They became injured. Yet witnesses separated by decades described what sounded like the same creature. The same height. The same blackened fur. The same yellow eyes. The more I read, the less comforted I felt. I had expected the stories to be silly. Instead, the details were familiar. The posture. The feeding. The road. The eyes reflecting in headlights. I closed the search page and told myself that was enough. Reading folklore at 3 in the morning had never made anyone more rational. The following night, I saw it clearly. A storm had moved through earlier that evening, leaving the roads wet and the fields covered in shallow fog. I had just completed a delivery south of Elkhorn and was heading back toward Bray Road. The temperature had dropped below freezing. Mist gathered along the ditches. I turned onto Bray just after 2:15. There was no traffic. A mile in, I saw something lying across the right lane. At first, I thought it was another deer. I slowed. The headlights passed over brown fur, exposed ribs, and a dark pool spreading across the pavement. The deer was fresh. Its legs twitched once. Then I saw the thing crouched over it. It was positioned on the shoulder with its back toward me. The body was covered in coarse, dark hair, almost black along the spine and lighter around the shoulders. Its hips were narrow. Its upper body was massive. The shoulders rose and fell as it pulled at the deer. One arm was braced against the ground. I say arm because it was not shaped like a front leg. It had an elbow, a long forearm, a hand. The fingers were curled into the deer's hide. I stopped without meaning to. My foot pressed the brake and the truck rolled to a halt 30 yards away. The creature froze. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then its head turned. The muzzle was long and wet with blood. The ears stood upright. Its eyes caught the headlights and flashed yellow. It looked directly at me. I felt something inside my chest tighten. The creature released the deer. Its fingers opened one at a time. Then it stood. Not awkwardly. Not like a bear rising onto its hind legs. It stood the way a person does. Its knees straightened. Its back unfolded. Its head rose above the hood of my truck. It had to be over 7 feet tall. Maybe taller. The arms hung nearly to its knees. The hands were narrow and dark, with claws extending from each finger. Blood ran from its mouth and dripped onto its chest. I could hear it breathing. The sound was deep enough to vibrate through the windshield. It stepped into the road. I shifted into reverse. The truck jerked backward. The creature lowered itself slightly, and for one terrifying second, I thought it would charge. Instead, it tilted its head. It was studying me. I kept reversing until the truck began drifting toward the ditch. Then I stopped, slammed it into drive, and pulled around the carcass. The creature remained in the road. As I passed, its face turned to follow me. I saw the eyes, pointed ears, the teeth, and something worse than all of that, recognition. Not intelligence exactly. Recognition. It knew the truck. It had seen me before. I drove nearly 70 miles an hour down a road where I usually stayed under 45. The truck swayed through the turns. Crates shifted in the back. When I checked the mirror, the creature was running behind me. It was on 4 legs at first. Its back rolled with each stride, and its arms reached farther forward than they should have. Then it rose. It ran upright for several seconds, keeping pace along the shoulder. I pressed the accelerator to the floor. The engine whined. The creature dropped onto all fours again and disappeared into the fog. I did not stop until I reached a 24-hour truck stop near the interstate. I parked beneath the brightest lights I could find. My hands shook so badly I could not unlock my phone. I stayed there until sunrise. That morning, I called in sick. I told my supervisor I had nearly hit a deer and needed sleep. I did not tell him the rest. I spent the day checking the locks on my apartment. I lived on the 2nd floor of an older building on the edge of town. Behind it was a narrow parking lot, a strip of grass, and then several acres of undeveloped woods. I had never thought much about those woods before. That day, I kept the blinds closed. I slept for 2 hours in the afternoon. When I woke, something was scratching against the brick outside my bedroom. 3 slow drags. Pause. 3 more. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor. I didn't move. The scratching continued for nearly a minute. Then it stopped. I remained in bed until dark. When I finally looked outside, there was nothing below the window. The next morning, I found muddy streaks on the brick. They began near the ground and reached almost to the roofline. That evening, I called my supervisor and requested a different route. He said the schedules were already set. I told him I would not drive Bray Road at night. There was a long pause. Then he asked whether I had seen something. The question caught me off guard. I asked what he meant. He said drivers had reported strange animals in the area before. Mostly dogs. One former driver claimed something chased his truck. The company had treated it as a joke. The driver disappeared from the schedule a week later. I asked for his name. My supervisor refused to give it to me. I asked whether the man had quit. Another pause followed. Then my supervisor said that was what he had been told. He offered to remove Bray Road from my route for a few nights, but there was no practical way to avoid the surrounding area completely. I accepted. For 3 nights, nothing happened. No carcasses. No tracks. No movement in the mirrors. I began to wonder whether the creature had only been defending its food. Maybe following me had been territorial behavior. Maybe it had stopped once I left the area. On the 4th night, I found a deer behind the warehouse. It lay beside the loading dock before my shift began. Its abdomen had been opened. One of its front legs was missing. The body had been arranged directly behind my assigned truck. My name was printed on a clipboard inside the cab. The warehouse sat more than 20 miles from Bray Road. I did not make deliveries that night. I drove straight to the sheriff's office. The deputy at the desk listened while I explained the carcasses, the tracks, and the creature in the road. I left out the part about it following me home. I knew how that would sound. The deputy took notes. He asked whether I had been drinking. I said no. He asked whether I had photographs. I showed him the tracks. He studied them longer than I expected. Then he told me large dogs sometimes moved through rural areas. I asked what kind of dog walked on 2 legs. He handed back the phone. The deputy offered to have someone remove the deer from the warehouse property. That was all. I went home before sunrise. As I entered the apartment building, I noticed a smell in the hallway. Wet fur. Mud. Something metallic beneath it. The smell grew stronger near my door. I stood in front of it without touching the handle. There were scratches around the lock. 4 narrow grooves in the wood. I backed away. The door moved inward by itself. Only an inch. I knew I had locked it. I stepped into the apartment. Nothing appeared disturbed. The television was off. The kitchen lights were off. My bedroom door remained closed. I should have left. Instead, I walked toward the bedroom. The smell was overwhelming now. Wet fur and blood. My hand touched the doorknob. Before I could turn it, something exhaled on the other side. The breath struck the door hard enough to make it vibrate. I ran. I made it halfway down the hall before the bedroom door burst open behind me. Wood cracked. Something heavy slammed into the wall. I reached the apartment entrance and pulled it wide. The creature crossed the living room on all 4s. It was too large for the space. Its shoulders struck the furniture. Its claws scraped across the hardwood. I saw its face for less than a second. The same yellow eyes. The same blood-dark muzzle. But there was no blood on its chest this time. It was not feeding. It was hunting. I threw myself into the hallway and pulled the apartment door shut. The creature hit it from inside. The frame cracked. I ran down the stairs. Another impact shook the wall. Then, glass shattered above me. The creature had gone through the bedroom window. I reached my car and locked the doors. The woods behind the building were silent. I started the engine. A shape dropped from the side of the building. It landed on the roof of a parked sedan, crushing the metal inward. The car alarm began screaming. The creature rose on two legs. Under the parking lot lights, I saw it better than I had on Bray Road. It was leaner than it first appeared. The shoulders and chest were huge, but the ribs showed beneath the fur. Old scars crossed its muzzle and upper arms. Its hands were nearly human except for the length of the fingers. Around one wrist was a strip of reflective yellow material. The same material worn by delivery drivers at my warehouse. I remembered what my supervisor had said. A former driver claimed something chased his truck. He disappeared from the schedule a week later. The creature stepped off the crushed car. I reversed out of the parking space. It lowered onto all fours. I sped toward the street. It followed. For 6 miles, I drove through town while the creature moved between alleys, yards, and darkened parking lots. It never stayed directly behind me. It cut across blocks, appeared ahead, disappeared again. It knew where I was going before I did. I realized I couldn't lead it to anyone else. Not to a friend's house. Not to a motel. Not to the police station. It had followed the route because the route belonged to me. It had followed the truck, then the warehouse, then my apartment. There was only one place it seemed to want me to go. Bray Road. I turned south. The creature stopped appearing once I left town. That frightened me more than seeing it. It did not need to chase anymore. It knew where I was headed. I reached Bray Road shortly before dawn. Fog covered the fields. I drove slowly, searching the shoulders. The original carcass was gone. So were the others. For several miles, I saw nothing. Then the road narrowed near the old red barn. Something stood ahead in the fog. The creature waited in the center of the pavement. I stopped the car. It did not approach. Instead, it turned toward the ditch. Then it walked into the field. After several steps, it looked back. It wanted me to follow. Every instinct told me not to. But I thought about the strip of safety material around its wrist. I thought about the missing driver. I thought about the animals placed along my route like markers. I took a flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out. The cold hit immediately. The creature stood 50 yards away at the edge of the cornfield. When I began walking, it moved ahead. It led me through the field toward a wooded rise. The ground there was soft and churned with tracks. All of them appeared to belong to the same creature. 4-legged impressions became 2-legged ones. 2-legged impressions ended without changing direction. Some tracks seemed fresh. Others had filled with old rainwater and decaying leaves. Several were so deep and weathered that they could have been there for years. The smell grew stronger as we entered the trees. Rotting meat. Wet soil. Blood. The creature stopped beside a shallow ravine. At the bottom lay the remains of animals. Deer, raccoons, coyotes, livestock. Bones layered over bones. Among them were pieces of clothing. A boot. A belt. A torn delivery jacket with faded reflective stripes. I did not need to see a body. The creature had brought the former driver here. Whether it had killed him or only taken what remained, I could not know. The Dogman watched me from the opposite side of the ravine. It stood completely still. The first gray light of morning began filtering through the trees. For the first time, I could see its eyes without the reflection of headlights. They were not yellow. They were dark, almost black, and they looked older than the rest of it. I can't explain what I mean by that. The body looked like flesh. The eyes did not. They looked like openings into somewhere light could not reach. I raised my flashlight. The beam passed across the creature's chest. For an instant, I saw something beneath the fur. Not bone. Not skin. A pattern of pale lines curved across its torso, too regular to be scars and too deep to be markings. They resembled letters or symbols. Then the creature shifted, and the pattern vanished beneath the hair. It lifted one hand. The strip of reflective fabric hung from its wrist. With the other hand, it pointed into the ravine. Not toward the delivery jacket. Toward something partially buried beneath the bones. A metal road sign. I climbed halfway down the slope before I could read it. The sign was rusted, almost completely brown. Only a few faded letters remained visible. Bray Road. It was not one of the modern green signs. This one was old. Older than any of the reports I had read. The post had been snapped away. Long claw marks covered its surface. I looked back at the creature. It was closer now. I had not heard it cross the ravine. It stood less than 20 feet away. I could smell its breath. There was blood on it again. Fresh blood. I looked toward its hands. They were clean. The blood was running from its mouth. A dark line slid from its lower jaw and fell into the leaves. Something small and metallic struck the ground with it. A key. The tag attached to it bore the faded number of one of our warehouse vehicles. I recognized the number. It belonged to a truck that had been retired years before. I stared at the key. When I looked up again, the creature was gone. There had been no movement. No footsteps. No breaking branches. It was simply no longer standing in front of me. Then, something breathed behind me. I turned. The Dogman stood at the top of the ravine. Between me and the field, it tilted its head exactly as it had on the road, studying me. I finally understood that I had been wrong about the carcasses. They were not territorial warnings. They were not evidence of ordinary feeding. They were messages. The creature had been recreating something. A sequence. The deer on the road. The fox facing the building. The body behind the truck. The tracks beneath my window. It had done this before. Perhaps many times. The former driver had followed the same trail. Maybe another driver had followed it before him. The creature was not teaching me where it lived. It was showing me what happened to the people it chose. I backed away from the ravine. The Dogman remained at the top of the slope. I moved left. It matched me. I moved right. It followed. There was no way past it. Behind me, something shifted among the bones. I turned the flashlight toward the sound. The torn delivery jacket moved. Not much. Just enough to expose what lay beneath it. A human hand. The skin was gray and tightened against the bones. One finger was missing. Around the wrist was a digital watch. The screen was still illuminated. The numbers showed 2:15. The exact time I had first seen the Dogman feeding in the road. Against my better judgment, I stepped closer. The date on the watch was not the current date. It was 17 years earlier, the year the former driver had disappeared. The display should have been dead. The battery should have failed long ago. Yet the seconds continued to change. 2:15 and 11 seconds. 2:15 and 12. 2:15 and 13. I heard the Dogman descend into the ravine behind me. Slowly, one step at a time, I ran. I climbed the opposite slope, pulling myself through wet leaves and exposed roots. The creature did not charge. It followed at a walking pace. That made it worse. It knew I could not escape. I reached the trees and pushed through them toward the field. The rows of corn should have been directly ahead. Instead, I stepped onto Bray Road. I stopped in the center of the pavement. My car sat 50 yards away. I looked back. There were no trees behind me, only an open field. No wooded rise, no ravine. Nothing that could have hidden the bones, the road sign, or the body. The Dogman stood beside my car. Its hand rested on the roof. I had left the driver's door open. Now it was closed. The creature dragged one claw slowly across the metal. Then it stepped backward into the fog. I ran to the car. The doors were locked. My keys were no longer in my pocket. I looked through the window. They hung from the ignition. The Dogman watched from the shoulder. I pulled at the handle. Locked. I struck the glass with the flashlight. Once. Twice. On the third strike, the window broke. I reached through, unlocked the door, and climbed inside. The moment I touched the keys, the radio turned on. There was no music, only static. Beneath it, I heard a man speaking. His voice was faint and distorted. At first, I couldn't understand him. Then the words became clear. Don't stop for it. The message repeated. Don't stop for it. It was followed by a low sound, not a growl. Laughter. The radio went dead. The Dogman was no longer on the shoulder. I started the car and drove. I did not look in the mirror. I left Wisconsin 2 days later. I abandoned most of what I owned inside the apartment. The bedroom window was still broken. The door frame had been split. The police report listed the damage as an attempted burglary. I never returned to the warehouse. My final paycheck arrived by mail. No one contacted me about the former driver. No one asked what I found along Bray Road. For years, I convinced myself the creature had let me leave because I understood the warning. I moved south. Changed jobs. Stopped driving at night. I avoided rural roads whenever possible. Eventually, the memories became less immediate. The yellow reflections stopped appearing in my dreams. The smell of wet fur no longer made my hands shake. Then, last October, I found a dead deer behind my house. I live nearly 400 miles from Elkhorn now. There are no major roads behind the property. No farms. No forests large enough to hide something like that. The deer had been opened beneath the ribs. One front leg was missing. In the mud beside the body were 4-legged tracks approaching from the road. 2-legged tracks led away. They stopped beneath my bedroom window. I moved again the next morning. It did not matter. 3 weeks later, another carcass appeared outside my new apartment. A fox this time. Its legs were folded beneath it. Its head faced the building. Last week, I woke at 2:15 in the morning. Something was scratching against the wall. 3 slow drags. Pause. 3 more. I kept my eyes closed. The scratching moved from one side of the bedroom to the other. Not around the outside of the building. Across the wall itself. When it reached the window, it stopped. I heard breathing on the other side of the glass. Then my phone lit up on the nightstand. A photograph had appeared in my camera roll. I had not taken it. The image showed Bray Road at night. A delivery truck sat beneath the old red barn. A man stood beside it with his back to the camera. I recognized the reflective jacket. The former driver. Farther down the road, barely visible in the headlights, stood the Dogman. The photograph was dated 17 years before I began working at the warehouse. There was another photograph beneath it. The same road. The same creature. A different truck. A different driver. That picture was older. Then another appeared. And another. The dates went backward by years. Then decades. Different vehicles. Different men. The same road. The same figure waiting in the distance. The final image had no date. There was no truck in it. No paved road. Only a dirt path cutting between fields. A horse-drawn wagon stood beside the trees. The Dogman was there. It looked exactly as it did when I saw it. The same height. Same scars. The same dark eyes. Behind it stood a weathered wooden sign. Bray Road. So I am telling this story now because I no longer believe the Beast of Bray Road is an animal. I do not know whether it eats because it is hungry. I do not know whether the carcasses are bait, warnings, or reminders. I do not know whether it follows the road or whether the road follows it. All I know is that people have seen the same creature for longer than any living thing should survive. And once the Dogman learns your route, moving away does not make you harder to find. It only gives the road somewhere new to lead. Thank you for listening to Hushed Hollows. Let us know in the comments which cryptid folklore you'd like us to tackle next time. Until next time, keep the lights on, stay off the back roads. And remember, some roads don't just take you somewhere. They bring something back with you.